I want to get your thoughts on this. What about financing it? So take those examples of real estate and the stock market. Let's say someone saved up $100,000.
Yeah.
With real estate, you only have to put $100,000 to get a $500,000 apartment, let's say, and the bank finances that. And that's like stable. People know how to do that. With the stock market, it's liquid. That's the benefit. So you can always decide to take out that money. Whereas if I'm a listener, the business, there's a lot of, unknown risks. You can't really just sell and buy a business as easily.
Yep.
Until Biscout's going to come out, of course. But for people that, are thinking about that, how should they think about financing a business like that?
Yeah, well, I like to do creative financing. So essentially, the interesting part about small businesses is they don't have a set market like real estate and stocks. You can't go to Fidelity or Schwab and say like, I'm going to pay you for the stock like this and like wheel your own deal. You can't do it. It's a highly, highly commoditized and processized industry. In real estate, you could go try to negotiate creative financing or seller financing, but you have a much lower likelihood. Maybe once there's massive pain in the market, you could do that more often. But by and large, that industry's become pretty commoditized. It's become pretty normalized and systematized. In small business, it's the Wild West. And so you can get as creative with buying a business as you can get the seller to agree with you on. So it really becomes helpful to become what we call a deal maker, which is, can you learn the language of money so that you can get somebody else to see the win-win in structuring creative deals?
Right.
And the nice part about buying businesses that I don't think most people realize is twofold. Say you want to go the more straightforward method. That would be like an SBA loan, where the Small Business Administration will loan you a percentage of the value of the business. So let's say that you put 10 to 20% down for a business, just like a mortgage, they will loan you the rest of it, pending, just like when you get a appraisal on a house, they will also do an evaluation on a small business. But let's say that it evaluates or it appraises appropriately, you can use the Small Business Association very similar to the house.
Yeah.
Now, we want to be careful about that because just like a house, you have personal guarantees, right? So you got to make sure if you're going to do your first deal, it's a good deal. Otherwise, you won't ever do one again. And so I do obsess on that. But then another way that we do most of our deals is through seller financing. It's through some aspect of, can I get this owner to see the value in our partnership and thus become the bank for me? And if the owner becomes the bank, then, we have a whole section on this financing. The graphs are really helpful in the book because, humans are visual and they're selling you their baby. And so, what I would do is I would kind of show them how it works. And I would say, here's why you would sell a business to me with seller financing. Because one, you could pay less in taxes because we defer your payments over the long term. Maybe we even do part of it as a consulting agreement. You have write-offs against the payments that we make. Do you want to pay less taxes to the IRS when you sell? Awesome. I can hook you up with that. Two, we can say we can do it faster. The average SBA loan takes 90 to 120 days. If you, Mr. Seller, are the bank, we can move quickly because we don't have an intermediary in the middle that has to come up with a bunch of documentation. And then also, because we can move fast, you can actually get the interest rate. So as opposed to the bank taking 8%, why don't you take 5%? That's 5% you would have never gotten before, and then I get to have a little bit less risk by not having as high of an interest rate. And then finally, for the purchase price, most often sellers want a higher purchase price for their business than the business may warrant. The SBA, you can't really, they go, this is what it's worth or it's not.
The SBA is the one that values it.
Yeah, well, technically the SBA has banks that it outsources all of these loans to and then backs a percentage of the loan, which makes more banks want to offer SBA loans.
Got it.
So it's sort of like you wouldn't go directly to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to get a loan, right? But they incentivize a bunch of the mortgage companies to do so. Same thing. And so with this, you go to the seller and you say, hey, you think the business is worth $1 million. The SBA thinks it's worth $750. I'll pay you $1 million, but you seller finance me the deal over a longer time horizon. And if everything happens like you said it would in the business, I'll pay the $1 million. If actually, the business doesn't do as well as we think it does, then we go down to $750. But wouldn't you like the option to earn up? Right. And so a lot of what we're trying to teach people is it's very hard to become rich if you don't actually speak the language of money. And I think the language of money is deal making. And once you start to understand this stuff, you don't sound the same as everybody else. And making money becomes easier because you can structure it.
Yeah. And the idea of seller financing is that when someone actually cashes out, they're going to have to put the money somewhere.
Yep.
Right. And if you can guarantee a higher, return than what they're currently getting, that's kind of the sell point for them to be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the sell point is really four things. It's, do you want to make more money? Because seller financing could do that. Do you also want to get paid an annuity, an interest rate because you're the bank? Because seller financing can do that. Do you want to move faster? Because this could take forever. And what kills most deals? Time. So you want to actually get this done or not? And then fourth, do you want to pay less to the IRS? Do you want to create a better structure for you from a taxation perspective? And if you want those four things, then let's talk seller financing and figure out how to do a deal where you feel taken care of. And like, I'm not going to run away with your business or fuck up your business, but also I feel more secure in buying your business because the seller always has an information advantage.
Sure.
And so we got to structure the deal in the way where it's a win-win for both parties.
Yeah. You briefly mentioned getting the first deal right. And I think that's so important. What is the right components and kind of the safety measures to ensure that people can get the first deal right? Because that's kind of what it comes down to, right? They're not going to likely do another deal if the first one doesn't work.
Yeah, well, the second segment of the book really focuses on what we call deal clarity, which I think is the most important part of the book. And it's the most important part because nobody ever talks to you about what business you should buy, what business you should go into, what, you're uniquely skilled at. Like, even when we filled out those things back in the day to try to tell us what career we went after, they were so remedial, right? They didn't really try to get you to know yourself, which is why probably a lot of us don't like what we do. They say somewhere between 65 and 82% of Americans don't like their jobs. Like, that's a wild number. That's like 6 or 8 people out of 10 hate what they do every day, where they spend more time doing that than anything else besides sleeping.
Yeah,
what a tragedy. And the reason why I think that is because we don't actually know what we want, because nobody taught us how to ask the questions to get there. We don't know what we're good at, actually. And then we're probably not as willing to take the risks that we need to and do the work that we need to in order to do the thing we want to. It's like, I always, get upset at people when they say, this is what I want out of life. These are my goals. And I'm like, no, don't tell me your goals. Tell me what you're willing to sacrifice in order to get what you want. And most people don't want to sacrifice. They just want to get. And so in the beginning, we talk about deal clarity, because deal clarity is really this idea of there's no such thing as a perfect business. There's no such thing as an awful business. There's only an awful or a perfect business for you. And so, for me, if you gave me a media company that was losing money, but had a ton of subscribers, that was in the finance space, that, was a young-ish audience, that might be a great business for me, even if it made $0, even if it lost a ton of money. Because it fits like part into my ecosystem. I just integrate the rest of the products and services we offer into it. I have more attention and eyeballs. That's actually kind of like a good deal for me. But that might be a terrible deal for my dad. He's like, what would I do with a financial media company that's losing money? What a terrible deal, right? And so lots of times on the internet, people oversimplify and they go, well, that deal's awful, or I'd never do that. And that just shows me that they don't know what they're talking about. Because there's no such thing as a good deal or bad deal, just a good deal or bad deal for you. And so deal clarity is really, how do you figure out what you're good at, what you're networked in, and where you're uniquely skilled to make money, and partner that with traditional deal box investing, which is like, I want a business that's located in this area, in this sector, that makes this much money, that I have to operate it because I want to run it, but I don't have to operate it because I'm an investor. And if we pair your deal clarity worksheet and your deal box together, you're going to be, you're no longer going to be a wondering question mark, right? You're going to have more clarity. And when you have more clarity, it turns out the universe kind of gives you what you want more often. But half the time, how can it give us what we want? Because we don't even know.
Sure. So guide us through that. When you're looking at size, you mentioned industry, you want to have something that you're experienced with, something that could potentially complement some of the other businesses that you're in if you already have other businesses. But with sizing seems like a big thing as well, because number one, most people don't have all of the money to fund all of the deals to get to a certain size. And some people don't want to buy another job.
Right.
So what is like the right amount of profits, let's say, or the right valuation? Like, how should people be thinking about the numbers exactly if they don't want to buy another job, let's say?
Yeah, well, I think there's sort of like three numbers that are pretty important here. If you want to buy a business, there's three numbers that you should look at. The first number is how much money do you actually want to put into the deal yourself? How much risk do you want to put into it? The second number is how much money do you want to raise, take on as debt, get from seller financing? How much do you think you want? And the third is how much money do you want to make? So we need to figure out the difference between those three, because a lot of people go, I have $10,000 I could invest. And they go, there's no way I could buy a business. I only have $10,000. I go, maybe, but do you have a bunch of rich friends, or do you know other people who want to actively invest in businesses, but maybe they don't want to do any of the work, and you do all of the work, but they backstop you, and they're kind of like mind starts to spin.
Right.
And I go, or are you willing to take on some debt? Does that not scare you because you've already run a business before and you've used debt before, so that's not that scary? Or simultaneously, do you think we could get good enough at doing a deal that a seller might be talked into something where you don't use a personal guarantee and you say, hey, let's try it in this small aspect of the business. If I start growing it, let me earn into that equity. Let's do a partial revenue share deal. And so I typically think if right now you are not going to buy a business, it's not because you don't have money, it's because you don't have knowledge. So that's why our entire business is education-based and book-based. It's like, I think you have no higher leverage activity than learning how to become a deal maker. I'm not sure there's anything else that I think over your life could make you more money. I also don't think you ever lose money learning in something like deal making. Now, you could lose money doing the thing, for sure. But so often we optimize on the things that we don't have when what we really don't have is knowledge. And so once you have knowledge, you realize there's money all around. If you call me tomorrow with a really good deal that made sense, I could go find $1 billion. Do I have $1 billion? Absolutely not. I wish I did. My mouth to God's ears at some point. I don't have it. Yeah. But if the deal is good enough and I am good enough, eventually I could get $1 billion. And I think we have to get more people to think that way. I don't have $100,000, but if I had an investment where I think I could make more than $100,000 continuously, and it was interesting enough for people, could I go out and bring in the money? And the answer is typically yes. So you usually don't struggle from lack of money. It's lack of knowledge and lack of good deals.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, every industry has really what the business is actually in when you break it down. So for example, like e-commerce or CPG, you're selling products, physical products, but a lot of them, if not majority, they're in the acquisition game, right? They're trying to figure out how to get the most customers at the most efficient cost. You have companies like Airbnb. The business that they're really in is serving hosts. Once they have the host, the demand will come. When it comes to buying businesses, what is the real business that you're in?
The real business is really it's a mixture of finance and negotiation.
So deal making.
Yeah, it's really, can you make deals? And making deals comes down to understanding numbers at a base level. I'm talking about like I bring in $1 and I spend 50 cents.
Okay, so I don't need to know calculus because that would not be.
I would never.
No, I'm done.
And I don't even really need to know how to do complex modeling. Like I don't need to know spreadsheets in depth, but I do need to be willing to understand a profit and loss statement.
Yeah.
And I think the other part is if somebody doesn't understand that, man, do you think you're likely to become a millionaire never understanding finances and a profit and loss statement and a spreadsheet? I live in Austin, the manifesting capital of the fucking world. You're not going to manifest millions without understanding how money is made. And that comes down to understanding a few spreadsheets. And I think we got to get over it. It's actually not that scary. Once you get into it and you have a few people kind of walking you through it and explaining, it really removes the fear. It's not like, I think we all have PTSD from calculus and algebra classes, which to this day, I don't really understand still.
Yeah.
But that is not the case with math. You can understand 1 + 1 = 2, and 6 × 2 is 12. And that's kind of all you have to understand for this.
Yeah, that's great. That's way less intimidating than I think what most people think about.
Yeah.
I think another way to help people wrap their heads around it is once I buy the business, how can I actually increase the value of it? Ideally, in a systematic way. You've bought dozens and dozens at this point. What are some of the things you've learned that have just worked over time, over and over again, to increase the value of the business so that when you buy it, maybe you just weren't the best deal maker in the first deal. you can still increase the value of the business so that you come out ahead.
Yeah, if you want to make more money in your business right now today, here's how we do it. First, we buy a boring Main Street business. Then we raise prices. Most small businesses' prices are underpriced anywhere from 30 to 300%. Then we typically try to do it in recession-resistant asset classes. So I want to have a business where it's like a plumbing business. They can continue to go even if something goes sideways. Finally, we add technology. And in adding technology in these Main Street businesses, they're very simplistic. It's like get them off fax machines, get them off paper invoices, get them off of individual phone calls, get them into a CRM. Most small businesses have none of that.
Basic stuff.
Very basic.
Interesting.
And that is the first step to increasing the revenue of your small business. Typically, that's something we do inside of the first 120 days in a business. So it's really just raise your prices and add technology. The second thing that we do inside of most small businesses is we obsess on getting people to say nice things about us, which is reviews. So in all of my businesses, I obsess on, can we get the customer to sell more for us?
You even commented on this, like that's the first thing you saw. You're okay.
Yeah, there's like a review QR code.
QR code on the TV, yeah.
Yeah, because most small businesses don't realize that a consumer will not buy from you 90% of the time if they don't have any reviews. 90% of the time, you will never get a purchase if you don't have a review. If you have one negative review, you need on average 20 to overcome the one negative review.
Wow, 1 to 20.
Right. And in small business land, people will drive up to 3 miles out of the way for a competitor if you're below 3.5 stars. So reviews are incredibly important in small business, and I obsess on those, and most small businesses do not. And it's work to do that, but it's not hard. Like it's not rocket science. It's not a new process. And so I obsess on reviews. The other thing you can do if you want to increase the revenue and profitability of your small business is when we come in, we do zero-based budgeting, which basically means we look at the business overall. We don't look at anything they spend money on right now. And we just say, what does this business really have to have? And so from a price and expense standpoint, this studio would be a great example. This studio needs to have all this podcast production gear, right? Yep. Does it need to have drinks out front that are free? No, probably not. That might come out if I do zero-based budgeting. Does it need to have 2 people staffing the podcast production thing, which is probably another high cost for them? Or would 1 be sufficient? Probably 1.
Right. The guy that's working the mic is like, oh,
fire,
shit.
Fire.
I guess today's my last day.
And so we go in and kind of look at, hey, where has this business had bloat? Because most small businesses have bloat. And on average, you don't want to come in and, like, I want to own these businesses forever. And the way you own a business forever is that you make sure it's sustainable. And so I think a lot of times people look to increase revenue first. I don't. I look to, I guess raising prices increases revenue, but I'm not looking to go get new customers. That's what most people try to do. Leads, right? How do I get new leads? How do I get new leads? Most often, if you're asking for leads in your business, that's the wrong problem in your business. You have a product business, you have a profit problem in your business, or you have an expense problem in your business. So PPE. And so that's how we think about it.
Yeah, it's interesting for me currently in an industry that's more, I guess, like AI driven, like complete opposite of boring. It's changing every day. I do get scared about disruption and all of these things, but let's take another example. Like someone has a design service agency currently, and their expertise is a design service agency. Should they not just buy another design service agency instead of a laundromat? Like what's for you, the obsession with focusing on boring kind of older businesses versus core competency?
Yeah, well, one, you should buy whatever business you think is most aligned to what we call your perfect fit business. I've never believed that Main Street businesses are better than online businesses, for instance. I own both. It's great. I think that we sometimes maybe in our online Twitter bubble, for instance, forget that, like, what would my dad do with an online business? What would most Americans do to be able to increase an online agency for graphic design with AI? That's not in the standard skill set. And so when I'm talking about this, I'm kind of talking to everybody and saying, hey, if you work right now in an auto mechanic shop, and you are willing to manage an auto mechanic shop, could you not own that auto mechanic shop? You absolutely could.
Yeah.
And so my message is more broad. And the message is also broad because, to be fair, some of our online businesses die. It's not as detrimental as our community businesses. You know, so if we have, you know, we're on a main street in Austin right now. If we have all the stores and restaurants and coffee shops here owned by big conglomerates, we're going to feel it. We like lose our actual main street.
Yeah.
And so I'm passionate about not losing that, because I think that would be a miserable place to live in. And we've all lived in a town or driven through a town where it just looks like a giant gas station or a you know, freeway stop. And I don't want to live in that world, and I don't think we have to. But I think if we let private equity keep buying everything, we will. Or we won't even realize it. We won't realize that all the stores on the street are actually owned by big conglomerates. And that won't be great either. But I think you should find what your perfect fit business is. So I was just fighting with my friend Greg online on Twitter this morning, as one does. And he was basically saying this exactly. He's like, why does everybody like these boring businesses? I like these online businesses. And I gave the bond versus stock example and said they're just two different things. And also, one has existed for a lot longer than the other. So I operate on the Lindy effect, which is basically the longer something has been in existence, data tells us the more likely it is to continue. There's actually much more risk in an AI brand new startup than there is in a car wash. And you would say, that makes no sense. AI is going to take over the car washing. And you're like, maybe, but probably not for a minute. You have more volatility in the new than you have in the old when it comes to investing. And so I operate off of those two things, and I like income. I like profitable businesses. But for somebody like you, or for somebody with a design agency, that's my favorite thing to do. I mean, we have something we just built for owners that's really cool, and we're testing it and working on it now, but how to do strategic acquisitions. And so I think if you look at most big companies, and you were to break down their revenue related to acquisitions, it's much higher than you think. I mean, a lot of these, I don't want to say the exact numbers because we're still combing through the data, but my assertion is it's going to be more than 50%. I think most businesses, if you have to attribute their actual revenue at some level to their acquisitions, it's the core business's ability to grow them, perhaps. But when you stack on those businesses, they compound like crazy. I mean, you know, Amazon and Whole Foods is a great example.
Yeah.
Like AWS, still probably the giant driver, but it's got to be more than 30% from their acquisitions of companies like Whole Foods X, the 190 other acquisitions they've done today.
Meta buying Instagram.
100% plus WhatsApp. You know, so I think even the big boys realize that it is the ability to compound with acquisitions is real. And a lot of people say, well, it looks like a lot of acquisitions don't work. And what my argument to that would be, one, I don't think that's true. I think M&A is very hard, and you have to make sure you don't overbuy things, meaning that the price isn't too high. But most acquisitions never get reported. You know, most small businesses never report buying and selling. In fact, there is nowhere to report buying and selling except through survey data. So
really?
It's a black hole. So, you know, for instance, I mean, we've done hundreds of acquisitions that are intra-company acquisitions.
Yeah.
And so I think if you own a design agency today and you want to grow fast and your design agency is stable and profitable, so you're not like dying and bleeding and don't know what to do next, probably don't add an acquisition if you're in that. But if your agency is sort of stable, you've run it for a while, you understand how to run an agency, and you want to double or triple growth, some of the fastest things to do are to acquire. You can do a vertical acquisition, you can do a horizontal acquisition, so you can acquire your competitors, you can acquire your supply chain, you could also acquire new customers, just do a customer acquisition. You could do an asset acquisition, which would be just acquire, you know, if you owned a podcast studio and this one was closing down, just acquire all the equipment from inside the podcast studio. There's so many ways to do acquisitions that cost really basically nothing. In fact, a friend of mine, Drew Sanaki, is on Twitter too, and I remember.
Did you fight with him too?
No, I didn't fight with him. I've been invested in him a few times, so I better not. But Drew made basically a career out of buying like sort of defunct, failing, unprofitable businesses from private equity for like $1 or $10. These are big businesses, $10, $20, $30 million in revenue, and he would say, "Listen, it's not going great for you. You're losing money. I'm going to buy the business for like $1 to $10. You're going to keep some of the liabilities. I'm going to keep some of the liabilities, but I'm going to run this thing for you and you get a percentage of the upside. So either you're failing either way. So you write it off, you take the loss, or you bet on my upside ability. And so he would buy these businesses for pennies on the dollar and grow them like crazy.
Wow. What are some other ways to get these bargains for businesses?
Yeah.
That people aren't talking about yet?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the biggest, I'll say this. A lot of people today think, I don't have time to buy a business. I don't have time to learn how to buy a business. I want to one day, but not right now. And I think that's a terrible idea. I think we need to learn how to do it right now because businesses are going to go on sale. And we are already seeing it. We had more bankruptcies. We'll have more bankruptcies this year than we had last year in business. Every single company that shuts down in bankruptcy is losing some value of assets that we could have taken for $0 or a nominal amount. And so if you want to buy a business, you should learn immediately because stuff's about to go on sale. And so it doesn't mean you have to go buy a business now, but I can promise you one thing. Once you learn how to buy a business, you can't turn it off. You'll just see it everywhere. Like, I'm sure it's the same with you. When you go into businesses in your industry, you're probably like, I mean, same thing with the review. I'm like, well, that's interesting. I'm like, oh, look, did you guys change the wallpaper? I can't turn it off.
Yeah, your reticular activating system
it's
is
your
just
reticular
always on.
Exactly. And you get to see through the matrix. And I think if more people are able to see in the matrix, it's not more competition for me and you, actually. It's more businesses saved. And the more businesses that are saved through really creative, not expensive solutions, the more of them can grow. And then I could actually buy those businesses.
Sure.
I'm probably not going to buy one that's doing 100, a couple hundred K. But if they grow it up to, $1 million, 5, 10, 20, 30, that might be a future business for me to buy.
Yep.
And so we need more of those businesses overall. Otherwise, what happens is the big guys get all the market share by default. And so when these other businesses close down, the big guys just go, okay, I get it for free. Customers for free. And that's what we really don't want.
Yeah. You advocate, along with a lot of great investors like Warren Buffett, to hold forever. And it's this just not selling. Yet when most private equity companies buy these companies or brands, their whole process is selling it. So what is the difference of how you're thinking about it versus, or how Warren Buffett thinks about it versus some of these private equity guys? Like, should you hold, and what are the pros and cons?
Well, the private equity guy, why private equity sucks the life out of companies is because they are on a timetable. The second they buy a company, the second that they take money from investors and put it into a company, the clock starts ticking. And somewhere about 7 to 10 years from that date, they need to return that money back to investors, which means that they've actually got to take that company and do something with it. They got to make it more money. They got to try to make that thing make 10, 20, 30% per year because the investors didn't give them the money so they could just return their money back over time. They've got management fees in there. They've got the actual operating fees of the business, plus they got to have a return to the business. So they got to juice that business up. Well, it takes, 3 to 5 years to turn around a business, to really grow a business aggressively. And then you can't just turn around and sell it the same day. It takes a couple years to sell it. So they basically got 5 years to get in there, grow this bad boy, and then start looking for the exit. Yeah. And they can't even keep the business if they want to because of the way their fund docs are structured. So inherently, they juice it up. And then right about year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, what are they doing then? They are trying to either squeeze as many of the profits out of the company as they can, or make the company as valuable as they can to sell it and get a big paycheck out of it. And so they're just incentivized differently. Not bad guys or gals at all. Just everything is incentives. We are all Pavlov's dogs, either getting a treat or getting a zap based on the things that we do. And so, so they have a weird incentive structure. Now, Warren Buffett is the opposite, right? Warren Buffett can hold stuff forever because that is his mandate. He is a holding company that is tax incentivized to continue to cash flow the way that they structured it. And his holding company has no end date. You just hold it forever and you can buy and sell the stock if you want to. But they have plenty of cash and they sit on it. And they could have shareholders that push them to use the cash in some way or the other. But by and large, he doesn't have a perverse incentive structure. So he can sit on C's candy for 10 years because he likes it. And so that's sort of the difference between the two. Now, again, I'm pretty big on I don't think anyone should do anything except I am pushy on becoming a deal maker. I think everybody should read the book, I know that's rude, I'm biased, but I think everybody should read the book, and I think everybody should go through our curriculum on business buying.
Yeah.
But do I think you have to buy a business? Absolutely not. I just think I've never had somebody reach out to me like, God, Codie, I wish you didn't teach me all this stuff about how to make money. That's annoying. Now I see deals everywhere. Never had that. But I do think that, you shouldn't hold a business forever if you don't want to. There are plenty of my first deals where I was like, oh, that was a great acquisition then, but it's not a good one for me now.
Why is that?
Maybe it's too small. Like some of my first laundromats, I don't own them anymore. So it might have been like, oh, okay, we're going to make 50, 100, 200K per year, which is awesome. And back then I was like, I'm so rich. But today I'm like, oh, that might not be worth it with everything else that we have going on. And that's what's beautiful about businesses. Then I sell it to somebody else and it becomes their starter business, just like your starter home was somebody else's starter home. And, the other cool thing about businesses is I've sold many businesses back to their operator, like my operator who I had run the business. And I've given them the business. And I'm like, hey, we made plenty of money off this thing. This is like material to you. You run this bad boy, you take it.
Wow.
Take the business and go.
No clause,
multiple
nothing.
times.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like I don't have investors where I have to be their fiduciary, responsible individual. It's just me and my stuff. And so we can provide a lot of value, get a lot of value, but also give it back and make a ton of money on the way.
I should sell you some of my businesses.
Exactly. Maybe. I'm open.
No, just kidding. So this idea of holding forever or selling, like there's no hard or fast rules per anything, right? It's
just what do you want to do?
All your circumstances, yeah.
Yeah, the most important thing is we would probably keep taking you back to your deal clarity box. And we would say like, what do you want right now? Because maybe in the beginning, you want to buy a complementary business in the AI space to achieve hypergrowth. And then you guys achieve hypergrowth, and man, this part of the business that you have is your AWS. It's like growing like crazy. You're like, oh my God, I'm printing money on this thing. But this business over here, which was sort of our real estate business that housed all of our employees or whatever, it's only giving me 5% return a year, whereas the AI company is giving me 50% return a year. Well, I should probably sell that real estate and I should take the cash and put it back into here because I can make 50% here and 5 here.
Right.
So that's why, for instance, Amazon doesn't build its own data centers, even though Amazon has never defaulted on a data center lease since its existence. It's like, what do you mean? Why doesn't Amazon own all those data centers? Because they can make so much money at a faster clip doing other things.
Yeah.